Kenny Bob. Now, as you know, both sides have officially rested in the trial against Florida dentist Charlie Adelson, who is accused of plotting the murder of his former brother-in-law, Dan Markel. Adelson wrapped up his testimony on the stand this morning as he stands charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to kill Dan Markel. But I want to go back to a key witness in this case, and that is convicted co-defendant Catherine McManua. And the reason why is it took 2 trials to convict her. She was hung on the first trial. So take a listen now to who she says came up with the plan to kill Dan Markel.
Did you know Dan Markel?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you have any personal beef with him?
No, ma'am, I did not.
What was your motivation for becoming a part of this murder plot?
Financially.
So not as a favor to Charlie Adelson?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading the objection, please.
I'll rephrase it, Your Honor. Was it a favor to Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Okay, but your primary motivation was not favor to Charlie Adelson?
Well, yes, ma'am, it was. And financially.
All right, because you were going to get paid for your part?
Yes,
How much
ma'am.
did you get paid?
I don't know the exact amount.
What was your relationship to Charlie Adelson?
He was my ex-boyfriend.
When did you meet him?
I believe that was in 2013.
Do you know what month?
Has to be around September.
Can you point him out and describe what he's wearing?
He's sitting over there with a blue jacket and a blue tie.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
The record will reflect.
Show you what I marked as states 48. Recognize this exhibit?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
How do you recognize it?
That's when we went to Key West.
Is that a fair and accurate photo of you and Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am, it
Is
is.
that when the two of you were taken, when the two of you were dating?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time I'd ask to move into evidence states 48.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
48 is admitted.
Do we have that for publication? So was this photo taken before or after the murder?
Before.
Who came up with the idea to kill Dan Markel?
Charlie.
So Sigfredo Garcia didn't come up with the idea?
No, ma'am, he did not.
Luis Rivera didn't come up with the idea?
No, ma'am, he did not.
When did the defendant first bring this idea up to you?
My first recollection was around Halloween of 2013.
Around Halloween or on the actual?
On Halloween, yes, ma'am.
All right. What's your recollection of how that came up?
We were at a Halloween party in Lincoln Road, and right before we were about to go, he got in the car with me and he asked me a question.
What was the question?
Do you know anybody that can harm someone?
And did you know anybody that could harm someone?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Who was that?
Sigfredo.
And at the time, what was your relationship with Sigfredo?
Wasn't the best.
But he was the father of your children, right?
Yes, ma'am. He is.
So were you dating both men at this time, or were you only dating Charlie?
No, I was only dating Charlie.
Okay. And so he meaning the defendant, initially said, do you know anyone that could harm someone? Was he aware of your connection to Sigfredo Garcia when he made that statement?
Not that I know of. No, ma'am.
Did you suggest Sigfredo Garcia at that time to the defendant?
No, ma'am.
What did you say?
I just said yes and kind of left it alone.
All right. Did it go any further than that at that time?
Not that night. I don't
Did
believe
you
so.
know who he wanted harmed at that time?
No, ma'am.
All right. Had you become aware during the course of your relationship with him that he had some kind of issue going on with his sister's ex-husband.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What did you learn about that?
He was just stating that his family wasn't, his mom and dad was stressed, and that his sister was having problems with her husband and custody of her 2 children.
And when did you learn that the person that the defendant wanted harmed was this ex-husband of the sister?
I believe later on.
All right. And when did you learn the name Dan Markel?
It wasn't until, I don't know if it was on my trial or when Sigfredo got arrested.
Okay, so even when he was killed, you didn't know the name of the person that was being killed?
Yes, I never knew his name.
How did the defendant refer to this person, if not by the name Dan or Danny Markel?
Wendy's husband.
Okay, Catherine Lizardo, the cross-examination of this centered around, of course, she had denied at her first 2 trials that she had anything to do with this, and really, and she was under oath, and that's perjury over and over. But now she's here in this trial, and she's giving up her former lover, Dan Markel, and she said her motive was financial. You know, it's us lawyers, we usually like 33 1/3 of $1 million in a settlement, but this was for somebody's life, and it seems kind of cheap to me. But she's now giving him up. Does the jury look at her with disdain and say, I don't believe her, or they look at her and say, you know, all of these people, they deserve to rot in hell, and the prosecution has proven its burden?
The jury will be given instructions, as you know, to take everything into consideration, including the fact that she has been convicted for this. And that causes bias against her as well in terms of her prior relationship with Dan Markel. But now that she has been convicted, as a juror, I'm thinking there's really nothing for her to gain by testifying against Dan. One interesting fact, too, is during her trials, or before her trial, she was offered a plea agreement of immunity, and she rejected that because she believed that she was innocent. If I was the extorter mastermind, as what Dan Markel is portraying her, I'd probably accept an immunity deal.
Yeah, so I would have advised her as a client. Obviously, her was a lot different there than his reactions to being asked questions and even cross-examination. For even his whole face looked puffier, and he had his hands up, and he was like this at some point, like, what is she going to say? I just thought that was very telling.
Well, I mean, during a lot of this trial, he's shown no warmth, especially when he was testifying or emotion. He was very matter of fact. You know, this was a murder case, and it was somebody who maybe he had some emotions towards that were negative, but, you know, family member. This questioning is devastating for him because, you know, she really ties it to him. And his only hope, really, at this point after her testimony is they don't believe her, and that they believe his theory of what happened here, which is the extortion.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting case. Obviously, the family of Dan Markel has been looking for justice as the prosecution has gone up the ladder, convicting people, and maybe if they convict someone else, Charlie Adelson, in the murder of Dan Markel, they will go further. But we'll have to wait and see on that, because when we come back, we're going to be talking about another case. But to know what it is, you have to come back with us here on the other side of this break.